Hi everyone. Let's talk about measurement. Measurement is particularly important if you do quantitative research. And a lot of companies, organizations, they really need a clear measurement so that they can actually monitor performance and track consumer satisfaction, looking at the changes in consumer trends and behaviors and preferences. And again, the challenge with measurement is not an exact science because many of consumer measurements, such as consumers' attitude, motivation, personality, intention to purchase a product, they're not tangible aspect, but sort of internalized condition, which the researcher tries to measure in concrete terms. So, and again, it's not this is the challenge because it's not really an exact science, but we can actually get as close as possible to those measurements. So there are stages that we can use to help create an effective measurement. So there are six stages. The first one, determine what is to be measured. Number two, determine how it is to be measured. Number three, apply a rule of measurement. Number four, determine if the measure consists of a number of measures. Number five, determine the type of attitude and scale to be used to measure it. And then six, evaluate the measure. Let's talk one by one. The first one, the step number one, it's really to determine what is to be measured. What do you want it to measure? Do you want to measure attitude? Do you want to measure perception, behavior? So the researcher, you and I, we really must identify the concepts relevant to the problem. And again, what is concept? Concepts are generalized ideas about a class of objects, attribute, occurrence, or processes. And again, more than one way to measure a particular concept. For example, salesperson success can be measured in dollar or unit, sales volume, or share of accounts lost. But again, step number one, before we do anything else, we have to look what is to be measured. And again, a process of precisely assigning scores or numbers to be attribute of people or object. And again, step number one, precision is the goal. You have to know what exactly do you want to measure. Measuring behavior is different than measuring intention. So you got to know exactly what do you want to measure. So number two, once you know what exactly you want to measure, you have to determine, okay, now how is it to be measured? And again, a particular concept must be made operational in order to be measured. You gotta really make it easy to understand. And again, an operational definition actually gives meaning to a concept by specifying the activities or operation necessary to measure. If you want to measure materialism, for example, and again, you got to know what is exactly meant by materialism. If you want to measure social entrepreneurship, what is actually social entrepreneurship? If you want to measure consumer ethics, you have to know what is actually and how do we measure actually consumer ethics. So we need a conceptual definition of each of the terms. What is materialistic, what is consumer ethics, what is people intention, and so on and so on. So a conceptual definition, this is a verbal explanation of the meaning of a concept. So it defines what a concept is and what it is not. Materialism could mean one thing to a person, but materialism could also mean another thing to another person. So for example, let's say you want to measure social entrepreneurship, right? So and we have to sort of create and know what is the operational definition. Let's say the concept that you want to measure is social entrepreneurship. So the conceptual definition is this is initiatives that are associated with aspects of innovation and modes of earned income generation by non-governmental organization. So, and again, when we read the word social entrepreneurships, now become clear, okay, so that's actually the definition of social entrepreneurship. And again, now the operational definition is self-report, and again, you have an open-ended question. Not-profit organizations were asked if any changes to their budget in the past 5 years reflected any of the following: development of a new business enterprise, commercial sales activity, charging fees for service. So, and again, social entrepreneurship, now we know the definition. Now, social entrepreneurship is measured as a value of 1 if the respondent reported the adoption of one or more of these approaches, and 0 if the respondent did not report undertaking any of these strategies in the 5-year period. So you have now, you know the definition. Now you can also identify and clarify how to measure. Another example, let's say I want to measure customer loyalty, right? So you've created a definition, and again, researcher can use 3 questions to assess customer loyalty, right? So again, once we know the definition, now we have to know how to measure this concept. For customer loyalty, on a score out of 10, a 9 or 10 on this score is sort of the promoter, 0 to 6 is a detractor. So, and again, you ask the question, how likely are you to recommend this product to others? And again, how likely are you to continue to use this product? And how much does this product service meet your overall requirements? So again, if a lot of the respondent, circle 10, 9, 8, so that means we can conclude that a lot of the respondents, they are very loyal, right? So you have to know the definition, and then you got to identify, okay, how do we measure this concept? Once we do that, and then you do step 3, which is apply a rule of measurement. So, and again, with the operational definition, help the researcher actually specify the rules for assigning numbers. Because you can assign 1 to 6, in the previous example, if you assign 1 to 10, 0 to 10, 10, that means very loyal. And again, values assigned can be manipulated according to certain mathematical rules, such as addition, subtraction, or multiplication. And again, usually in terms of measuring a concept, you use what we call scale. This is a series of items that are arranged progressively according to values of magnitude. Is this a series in which an item can be placed according to qualification? We have 4 different types: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. And we will discuss this concept, the nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio, in a different video. Please watch that video. So step number 4, we need to determine if the measure consists of a number of measure. And again, this is an attribute of a single characteristic or fundamental feature of an object, person, situation, or issue. And again, does that have affective or cognitive or behavioral components? Affective, I dislike brand A. Cognitive is more like, I think brand B is better than brand A. If you wanted to measure behavioral, then you would ask the question, I intend to buy brand B when I go shopping. So you can see, when you want to measure a particular concept, do you focus more on the affective, or do you want to measure sort of the cognitive, or you want to measure more about behavior? So, and again, the way to measure this one, we usually use multi-item instruments to measure a single concept with several attributes, usually called index measure or composite measure. So, and again, an index of social class can be based on a combination of residence, occupation, and education. Let's say you want to study the effect of a particular wealth, particular income on their behavior. Then, if you want to measure social class, you can't just measure on single evidence, for example, residence, or just the education, or the occupation, or the amount of money. It's probably a combination of a particular of a few concepts. Another example, a salesperson morale may be measured by combining questions such as satisfaction with their job, satisfaction with the territory, or satisfied with personal life. So, and again, if you wanted to measure salesperson morale, you can't just measure just their job satisfaction, but you can look at satisfaction with the company, satisfaction with the territory, satisfaction with personal life, and so on. Now, once you understand the concept, the definition, how to measure that, and now this is an example of a survey of a measure using a composite measure using rating scales, right? So, and again, for example, you look at a consumer trust of a website. You want to measure that. You've defined what is consumer trust on a website, how different trust on a website compared to trust on brand, for example. So you have to clarify. Once we did that, then we can try to measure. For example, with these one, let's read question 1. The site appears to be more trustworthy than other sites I've visited. So and then SD, strongly disagree, SA, strongly agree. And then we can ask respondent on their trust toward a particular website. And again, my overall trust in this site is very high, and then we can ask them to circle. My overall impression of the believability of the information on this site is very high. Again, agree, disagree, or any other answer. And then later on, we just combine them, tabulate the score, and then get the mean score. So then we can see the mean value, how much a particular consumers actually trust a particular website. If the score toward 5, that means they really trust the website. If the score are 1 point something, then that means the consumers don't really trust the site. And again, let's say you wanted to measure attitude. And again, attitude is sort of an enduring disposition to consistently respond in a given manner to various aspects of the world. It's sort of hypothetical construct that is not directly observable, but is measurable through indirect indicators. So, and again, if somebody asks you, what is your attitude toward global warming? What is your attitude toward poverty? What is your attitude toward Apple Watch, for example? And then and then we can actually, it's not an exact, might not be related to behavior, but at least you can get a sense your attitude toward a particular concept. And again, in the research, we do measure attitudes a lot, because measuring attitude is very important, because changing consumer attitude is a major marketing goal. You wanted to change consumer attitude toward your brand. You want to make it from negative to positive. We also normative scales, and again, this is a measurement designed to make comparison among other people on a particular construct. 1 to 5, evaluated in isolation from other items. We also have ipsative scales, and again, this is a measurement designed to compare items from the same person in ranking or choice tests, where items are explicitly evaluated on their relative attractiveness. For example, I want to measure your preference toward a particular mobile phone brand. We compare iPhone compared to Samsung, compared to Google brand, compared to Microsoft, and then we ask you to rank which one is the most preferred. You put ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So measuring attitude is very important, and this is one of the most widely used scale items in research. For example, if you want to measure attitude, this obtaining, let's say you wanted to look at obtaining verbal statements from respondent, generally requires that respondent perform a task such as ranking, rating, sorting, or making choices. You can ask them to rank most favorite place to live from New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, and then you can rank. This is an order, a small number of objects on the basis of preference, or you can rate, do some rating, you can do some sorting, and then you can do some choices between two alternatives. Which car brand, for example, you prefer, BMW or Mercedes or Audi, and then you ask them between two alternatives. So in terms of measuring attitude, we also have rating scale. This is designed to enable a respondent to report the intensity of their attitude. You have simple attitude scale, you have category, the most what you usually like it, you have the semantic, you have numerical, you have staple, you have constant sum scale, and also you have graphic rating scale. Let's look some of the example of these rating scales. The most widely used is rating scale. And again, remember from the beginning, I don't want you to forget, we talk about what you want to measure. We have to define the problem. We have to look at what is actually we want to measure. And then now once we know how to measure, and then we use all these tools is actually to measure the concept. The Likert scale allows respondents to rate how strongly they agree or disagree with the statement. And again, this is an example of Likert scale. My doctor's office staff takes a warm and personal interest in me, and then you ask them to rate 1 to 5, 1 to 6 or 1 to 7, whether you agree or disagree. My doctor's office staff is friendly or courteous, from 1 to 5 or 1 to 6. And again, you can calculate, get the mean score, and then you can get the overall attitude score toward a particular score about patient interaction with a physician service staff. We also have semantic differential scale. So this is a measure, a 7-point rating scale that uses bipolar adjective. Fast and slow, good or bad, happy, unhappy, intellectual, emotion, new and old, to anchor both ends. You see the difference with the previous slides where you have to put 1 to 7, but now you have two bipolar sides. And again, this is an example of the measurement of a time pressure when selecting a new mobile phone service provider. Let's say somebody asks you, how much time did you have to make a decision when you last switched from one mobile phone service provider to another? No time pressure versus too much time pressure. More than adequate time available versus not adequate time available. And then you can ask, and then you can choose which one is your preference. You can also have something like this. This is an example of image profile derived from semantic differential data. This is image profile of a commuter airline versus major airline. Using semantic, the positive, negative, and neutral, consistently on time, typically late, reliable baggage handling, undependable, desirable schedule, inconvenient schedule, seriously conscious, not security conscious. And then you can see a nice, so you can see that the major airline, you can see the image there more toward very expensive, but also it's very reliable. But you can see also the commuter, the blue one, they have loud equipment, crowded planes. So if you work for this airline, then you can see which of these aspects which some of these attitude actually affect consumers toward your services if you work for the airline industry. We also have, in terms of measuring attitude, is graphic rating scale. You've seen this probably a lot in the airport sometimes when you go to the using the toilet, and then are you happy with the service? Are you happy with the cleanliness? You have to press this graphic rating scale, happy face scale, which is very good or very poor, because sometimes you just put the number. Sometimes you would confuse what is number 1 actually means, what is number 3 means. But if you give a picture, then people can just see it. Yep, if I'm very happy with the cleanliness of a toilet, for example, it's easy to understand. So this is a nice summary of what we've sort of discussed. I'm giving quite a few, not all of them, but for example, with the Likert scale, the subject must evaluate statement on a scale of agreement. The advantages are easier scale to construct, but again, the disadvantage, it's hard to judge what a single score actually means. So, and again, you got to look, and again, you would ask, how do we choose which method to use? But you have to look back at the objective. And again, you have to look at what is actually the definition of this concept, and then choose which one of these rating measure is actually the most effective, the most appropriate for us to measure that concept. And again, you got to look at the context. Where do you measure? Do people actually have enough time to think about the question? For example, when in the airport, the example that I gave you before, people are in a hurry, people go to the toilet, they want to in and out, they don't have time really to think about reading the question, and then that's why probably using graphic scale, just using a smiley face or unhappy face, make it so much easier for respondent to fill in, then probably use graphic scale. But again, if you conducted a study where respondent actually have plenty of time to think, then probably using Likert scale, because they have the time to read, and so they can respond appropriately. So, and again, there's no best way. You got to really know, again, the definition, the operational definition. You have to look at the context. You have to look at the situation in terms of how respondent actually respond to your survey. So now another example. What if we wanted to measure behavioral intention? And again, attitude is one of the concepts that we love to measure as a marketer. But sometimes we also measure behavioral intention. So the behavioral component of an attitude typically representing a buying intention. How much are you intend to buy Apple Watch? How likely are you buying the next iPhone 12, for example? So for example, this is category scale measure the behavioral components of attitude. How likely is it that you will purchase an iPhone 7? I will definitely buy, I will definitely not buy, and so on and so on. So in terms of selecting a measure scale, and again, there's, like I said before, there's no single best answer. It depends on quite a few things, but it depends on the nature of the attitudinal object to be measured. And again, like I said before, it also depends on manager's problem definition, and also backward and forward linkages to choices already made. Once you did that, once you actually look at and went through all the stages, now just evaluate the measure. There are 3 major criteria for evaluating a measurement. First, look at the reliability. This is the degree to which measure are free from random error and therefore yield consistent result. If respondents have a clear understanding of the concept that you ask them, then you have a good reliability. You ask to a different group, it usually produces the same result. And also the validity, the ability of scale to measure what was intended to be measured. Do you really actually measure intention, or are you measuring behavior? Are you measuring more affective or cognitive? And you have to make sure that you have that validity. And you also have Sensitivity, this is the ability to accurately measure variability in stimuli or responses. So if you look at this figure, and again, this is nicely illustrate your research, if in terms of reliability and validity on a target. And again, if you look at target A, this is low reliability. There's no particular clear pattern, and it's all over the place. But you can also look at target B, which is high reliability. But if you look at target C, this is reliable but not valid. They group them, but maybe it's not really intended if you want to measure something, but actually it turns out you're measuring different things. So these are some of the concepts in terms of measurements. These are some of the stages that we need to go through in order to produce a good measure for your research. Thank you.